Alright, it's the Unit 9 test. Let's go ahead and get started. Number 1, that any person owning and residing on land may, under the provisions of this Act, enter other land lying contiguous to his or her said land, which shall not, with the land so already owned and occupied, exceed in the aggregate 160 acres. During the 1860s and 1870s, the U.S. government sought to find new ways to support the settlement of the Great Plains. Based on the excerpt above, which act increased the settlement of the Great Plains region? A. The Pacific Railway Act, B. The Homestead Act, C. The Moral Land Grant Act, or D. The Dawes Act. Number 2. In the Great Plains region, Native Americans were nomadic people. How does this picture demonstrate the Great Plains Indians' way of life? A. The Indians were paid by settlers to exterminate the buffalo. B. The Indians depended on the buffalo for survival. C. The Indians overhunted the buffalo and drove them to extinction. D. The Indians hunted buffalo for nothing other than sport. Number 3. The closing of the western frontier represented a turning point in the relationship between Native Americans and the U.S. government. Government-funded projects like the Pacific Railway Act led to increased conflicts, like the Battle of Little Bighorn between American settlers and Native Americans. Which of the following is not correct about the Battle of Little Bighorn? A. It led to more years of fighting between the Plains Indians and U.S. government troops. B. The Sioux Indians were defeated by the military power of the U.S. troops. C. More U.S. government troops came to the Great Plains area. D. Eventually led to more anger and conflict by the U.S. government towards the Sioux Indians. Number 4. Life in the Great Plains was different from other regions in the United States. Few trees and open farmland posed problems for new settlers as they attempted to farm in the region. The invention of barbed wire was very important because settlers on the Great Plains could A. Allow their cattle to roam free in the long drive. B. Keep their cattle confined to limit stampedes and fence off the land. C. Prevent hostile Native Americans from attacking homes. D. Effectively started to clear land for the Transcontinental Railroad. An act to aid in the construction of a railroad and a telegraph line from the Missouri River to the Pacific Ocean, and to secure to the government the use of the same for postal, military, and other purposes, are hereby created and erected into a body corporate in politics, in deed and in law, by the name, style, and title of the Union Pacific Railway Company. And the said corporation is hereby authorized and empowered to lay out, locate, construct, furnish, maintain, and enjoy a continuous railroad and telegraph. Number 5. Using the excerpt above, which act aided in the development of the Great Plains region? A. The Pacific Railway Act. B. The Homestead Act. C. The Moral Land Grant Act. Or D. The Dawes Act. Tell General Howard I know his heart. What he told me before, I have it in my heart. I am tired of fighting. Our chiefs are killed. Looking Glass is dead. Tahul Shoot is dead. The old men are all dead. Hear me, my chiefs. I am tired. My heart is sick and sad. For where the sun now stands, I will fight no more forever. The famous Native American leader who said the speech above was A. Sitting Bull, B. Geronimo, C. Chief Joseph, D. Tecumseh. Number 7. The Great Plains was the last region in the United States that was unsettled following the Civil War and Reconstruction. The United States government used several acts of Congress to increase the settlement of the Great Plains. As Americans moved onto the Great Plains, they took land from Native Americans, breaking previous treaties and forcing them onto blank, ending their previous blank lifestyle. Is it A. Cattle ranches labor, B. tenant farms industrial, C. reservations nomadic, D. internment camps agricultural? Number 8. The winter of 1877 and the summer of 1878 were terrible seasons for the Cheyennes. Their fall hunt had proved unsuccessful. Indians from other reservations had hunted the ground over before them and driven the buffalo off, and the Cheyennes made their way home again in straggling parties, destitute and hungry. Number 8. Helen Hunt Jackson's book, A Century of Dishonor, was about A. Native American killing U.S. government troops to gain land, B. The broken promises of the U.S. government to Native Americans, C. The fact that Native Americans formed alliances to take U.S. troops, D. The conspiracy of Native Americans to bring down the U.S. government. Number 9. The building of the Transcontinental Railroad opened up the American West to rapid development. Connecting the two American coasts made the economic export of Western resources to Eastern markets easier than ever before. This encouraged westward expansion, escalating conflicts between Native American tribes and settlers, who now had easier access to new territories. Number 9, using the information above and the picture to the right, what is being portrayed about the transformation of the West? A, the beginning of a new technology started in the West. B, the extermination of the buffalo led to a better life for Native Americans. C, the Homestead Act and Pacific Railway Act led to the end of the Native American way of life. D, the union of the Native Americans and settlers helped to create technology in the West. Number 10, American settlers in the West introduced the idea of blank as a result of government actions and incentives to settle the land. This created tensions and ended the Native Americans' blank way of life in the Great Plains. Is it A, agricultural and technical schools and tribal? B, the Transcontinental Railroad, agricultural? C, the telegraph, private? D, private property, nomadic. Number 11. By the mid-1800s, conflicts with Native Americans was closely associated with the territorial expansion of the United States. As Americans moved west, tensions were created with various tribes living in regions acquired by the United States government. Treaties were often used to move tribes off lands as a means to avoid conflict, and were often broken in future years. This is seen with the Treaty of Blank in 1868, when Native American tribes were promised land in the Black Hills until Blank led the United States government to break the treaty. A, Guadalupe Hidalgo, Native American retaliation. B, Fort Laramie, the discovery of gold. C, Paris, the discovery of oil. D, Versailles, a stampede. Number 12. The area pictured is often referred to as the A, Louisiana Purchase. B, Convention of 1898 Treaty. C, Great Plains. D, Mexican Cession Territory. Number 13. With the completion of the Transcontinental Railroad, the time it took to reach the West Coast was reduced from 6 months by wagon to 6 days on a train. This technological achievement was completed with construction of the telegraph lines running beside the railroad. What impact did the telegraph have on the United States? A, it was extremely costly to the government and slowed down westward expansion. B, it was largely unsuccessful and had very limited lasting impact. C, it decreased the amount of time it took to travel across the United States. D, it increased communication and encouraged westward expansion. Number 14. 1,000 Cheyenne and Apache lived at the edge of the reservation land. Their chiefs had recently sought peace in talks with white officials and believed they would be unbothered at their isolated camp. Hundreds of cavalrymen suddenly appeared at dawn on November 29th. A Cheyenne chief raised the stars and stripes above his lodge. Others in the village waved white flags implying surrender. The troops replied by opening fire, killing at least 150 Indians, most of them women, children, and the elderly. Colonel J.M. Shivington led an army unit in 1864 that A, massacred a group of Cheyenne Indians at Sand Creek, B, protected settlers who lived in Indian Territory, C, guarded against Indian raids on the Santa Fe Trail, D, argued for the fair treatment of Indians on reservations. Number 15. Using the map to the right, what was the purpose of the trails being displayed? A, cowboys used them to get cattle to the railroad to be shipped back east to support the growing cities. B, Western settlers used them to avoid conflict with Native Americans. C, Mormons used them to avoid persecution. D, Native Americans used them to follow the buffalo. Number 16. An act donating public lands to several states and territories, which may provide colleges for the benefit of agricultural and mechanic arts, to teach such branches of learning as are related to agriculture and the mechanic arts in such manner as the legislatures of the states may respectively prescribe, in order to promote the liberal and practical education of the industrial classes in the several pursuits and professions in life. An annual report shall be made regarding the progress of each college, recording any improvements and experience made, with their cost and results, and such other matters, including state industrial and economical statistics, as may be supposed useful, one copy of which shall be transmitted by mail, by each to all other colleges which may be endowed under the provision of this act, and also one copy to the Secretary of Interior. Based on the excerpt above, how did the donation of public land benefit the Great Plains? A. Setting aside 160 acres of free farmland to anyone who would stay on the land for 5 years. B. Called for construction of a transcontinental railroad to transport goods for farmers. C. Set aside land grants to be used for construction of agricultural colleges. D. Made reservations into farms and called for the Americanization of Native Americans. Number 17. What technology was crucial to survive in the West because it gave farmers and others access to water and energy? A. Mechanical reaper. B. Telegraphs. C. Windmills. D. Steel plows. Number 18. As a result of African Americans facing discrimination and violent attacks in the South, many African Americans moved to Kansas and the Great Plains in the pursuit of the American dream. C. The federal government sent African Americans to live in California. D. African Americans supported an end to Reconstruction. Number 19. The growth of Eastern cities and the settling of the West created a market for the cattle industry and the use of cowboys on a large scale. What was the main function of cowboys in the West? A. Protect towns from outlaws and Native American attacks. B. Keep cattle confined to ranches through the use of barbed wire. C. Move cattle on cattle drives to be sold and transported to cities. D. Help build the railroad to support Western expansion. Number 20. Who was credited with inventing barbed wire? A. Colonel Shivington. B. George Custer. C. Joseph Glidden. D. Chief Joseph. Number 21. To decrease construction time and costs, the United States government paid 2 railroad construction companies to begin work in the East and the West. The first transcontinental railroad was completed when the 2 companies met at blank in 1869. A. Salt Lake City, Utah. B. Denver, Colorado. C. Promontory Point, Utah. D. Washington, D.C. Number 22. Native Americans depended on the buffalo, following herds from place to place and hunting the buffalo. What is this type of lifestyle called? Farming, reservation lifestyle, C. Communist, or D. Nomad? Number 23. The U.S. government encouraged people to settle in the Great Plains to increase the population. With population growth and the development of towns and cities, the Great Plains would eventually become A. States, B. Territories, C. Countries, D. Sovereignties. Number 24. Early Western settlers.
Staff and students, please join us at 8:10 in room 114 for morning prayer.
Number 24. Early Western settlers were faced with several challenges in the Great Plains. Settlers had to establish homes and farms with little to no support from the outside world in a hostile environment. What type of houses were settlers forced to construct as a result of scarce trees and lumber? A. Sod house. B. Straw huts. C. Pueblos. D. Longhouse. Number 25. The growth of American eastern cities in the mid and late 1800s posed a challenge to the growing country. The United States needed to increase its food production and constructed the Transcontinental Railroad. How did the invention of the refrigerator car impact the development of the United States? A. Transported food from the Great Plains to eastern cities. B. Stored beef for cattle ranchers in the West during long, hot summers. C. Replace cowboys as cattle ranchers with preservation of meat. D. Transport food from the East Coast to farmers in the Great Plains. Number 26. Early Great Plains settlers faced several challenges while establishing farms in the Midwest. One of the greatest challenges was managing the thick, grassy terrain to locate fertile soil. What invention allowed farmers to remove the top layer of grass, allowing them to establish productive farms? A. Steam-powered tractor. B. A mechanical reaper. C. A steel plow known as a sod buster. Or D. Barbed wire. Number 27. Abraham Lincoln's signing of the Homestead Act on May 20th, 1862, granted Americans 160-acre plots of public land for the price of a small filing fee. The Civil War-era act, considered one of the United States' most important pieces of legislation, led to Western expansion and allowed citizens of all walks of life, including former slaves, women, and immigrants, to become landowners. All of the following were conditions of the Homestead Act except A. You had to live on the land for 5 years. B. You had to build a house. C. You had to pay a yearly property tax on the land. Or D. You had to improve the land, usually by farming. Number 28. To support a growing population in both eastern cities and the Great Plains, the United States government became increasingly involved in the country's production of food and transportation systems. This is seen with what congressional act that allowed the use of federal funding from land sales for the construction of technical colleges? A. The Morrill Land Grant Act. B. The Pure Food and Drug Act. C. The Homestead Act. Or D. The Interstate Commerce Act. Number 29. By the 1860s, the United States owned and inhabited a large majority of North America as a result of wars and treaties with foreign nations. As a result of territorial expansion, the American population and the addition of new states progressively moved west in the late 1700s and early 1800s. What historical event led the Great Plains to be unsettled and the last remaining territory in the United States? A. The California Gold Rush caused West Coast states to enter the Union quickly. B. The Mexican-American War stopped Western expansion. C. The U.S. government set land aside for Native Americans in the Great Plains. D. National parks were created to protect land in the West. Number 30. The closing of the western frontier created tensions between American settlers and several different Native American tribes living in the region. As the number of settlers moving to the Great Plains increased, conflicts with Native Americans also increased, impacting the development of the United States. Settlers also began to hunt buffalo native to the Great Plains, killing hundreds of thousands, almost to the point of extinction. How did the destruction of the buffalo impact the Native American way of life in the Great Plains? A. Native Americans continued a nomadic lifestyle. B. Settlers and Native Americans began to coexist. C. Settlers allowed Native Americans to continue their lifestyle. D. Native Americans could no longer be nomadic and were forced to live on reservations. Number 31. The completion of the Transcontinental Railroad was a turning point in the United States history. The construction of the railroad took over a decade and at the time was one of the world's greatest modern marvels. To complete the project as quickly as possible, two companies began building on the east and west coast. To meet the labor needs of such a large undertaking, both companies became dependent on immigrant labor. This is seen on the West Coast with the use of blank laborers, and from the East, blank immigrants were most commonly used. A. Japanese and Germans. B. Chinese and Irish. C. Mexican Canadian. D. Spanish and British. Okay, this passage goes for 32 and 33. Dear sir, so many people ask me what they shall do. So few tell me what they can do. Yet this is the pivot wherein all must turn. I believe that each of us who has his place to make should go where men are wanted, and where employment is not bestowed as alms. Of course, I say to all who are in want of work, go west. But what can you do, and how can your family help you? Your mother, I infer, is to be counted out as an effective worker. But what of the rest? And you? Can you chop? Can you plow? Can you mow? Can you cut up Indian corn? I reckon not. And in the West it is hard to find such work as you have been accustomed to. The conditions of living are very rude here. And on the whole I say stay where you are, do as well as you can, and devote every spare hour to making yourself familiar with the conditions and dexterity required for the efficient conservation of outdoor industry in a new country. Having mastered these, gather up your family and go west. Yours, Horace Greeley. Number 32. In what ways does Greeley's letter above help explain the failure of many Americans to establish homes and farms in the Great Plains in the late 19th century? A. Many settlers on the Great Plains moved without their family to support them. B. Many settlers on the Great Plains were not willing to work hard enough. C. Many settlers on the Great Plains did not want to be farmers. D. Many settlers on the Great Plains were unprepared for the difficulties of farming. Number 33. According to the letter from Horace Greeley, which of the following factors led many people to seek their perception of the American dream in the West? A. Many people did not like living in the United States. B, many people wanted to strike it rich in gold or silver. C, many people did not like living on the coast. D, many people faced unemployment in the East.